Joining us on the line right now is Joe DiGenova, a legal analyst. And Joe, you were the U.S. attorney during many of the years that Marion Barry was often called the mayor for life. And I know that your office at the time was investigating the mayor, and then you left office before the event at the Vista Hotel. Your memory, your thoughts of that time and place?
Well, first of all, may he rest in peace. Everyone is entitled to a good going-away party at the end of their life. That said, his legacy for the District of Columbia is pretty bad. It started actually before my time in office and has ended long since because there is a trajectory of incompetence and corruption that starts with him and ends up with the current mayor and the number of current council members who are going to prison. He was an important black political figure. He stood astride, however, a corrupt and incompetent local government. He created a bloated bureaucracy which was inefficient. And I must say one of the worst things that he did, to his discredit, was he ruined one of the best police departments in the country and destroyed it with cronyism, corruption, bad appointments, to the point when they, as you all recall, they started filling the ranks of police officers with criminals from Central America and the islands. Marion Barry was a compelling figure. He was a god to local blacks, and what he did was he created an atmosphere of forgiveness. And by that I mean, if you were a black politician in D.C., no matter what you did, you would be forgiven by the people, and that's what he talked about. And he was absolutely correct. No matter what you did, you could be forgiven. During my time in office, we convicted a number of his deputy mayors for corruption. The police department went downhill steadily into one of the worst in the country, having been one of the best in the country. I think actually the police department is being such a mess, which it still hasn't been cleaned up, was really the most important part of his legacy from my perspective, other than the law breaking, which he did when he became a cocaine addict, dealt with local drug dealers, and with the assistance of his police entourage. You know, he had a security detail. They took him around everywhere where he needed to go.
And turned a blind eye, that's right.
You know, and of course, that was part of the inevitable corruption of the police department. And everybody knew it, including people at the Washington Post, who, you know, once he got caught at the Vista Hotel, that was a big surprise, quote unquote, to people at the Washington Post who had been forgiving him. They all knew about this. He was passing out at meetings, for God's sakes, from ODing from cocaine. I mean, everybody knew this. And what was sad about it was people could have helped him, and they didn't do it. And the Post, of course, ever worried about its circulation figures, covered up for him for 20 years.
So, Joe, I wonder, though, you said this is a legacy that is sort of maintained, but, you know, listen, we just had Mayor Vincent Gray, African-American, who got into some legal trouble, and the voters ended up turning him down. I mean, this isn't just a question of a black mayor being able to pretty much do anything and get away with it, because you have to factor into that his own personal charisma and the connection that the people had with him specifically.
I don't think there's any doubt about that he was an amazing politician. I mean, he was a very smart guy. He had a chemistry degree. He was cagey. He was wily. He was smart. He understood the Alinsky model of ridicule and denigration. But he was much more than that, and he should be given credit for that. But also, at the same time, you have to do the whole ledger, and the whole ledger is the District of Columbia is a mess, and it's a mess largely because of him.
It has been written by some that when you were the U.S. attorney, he was on guard because he felt like you were coming after him, and that when you left the office, he felt like, well, I'm through the worst of it. I can sort of let down my guard, and that's when the incident occurred at the Vista Hotel.
Well, that's actually true. I mean, he actually told people that, and he felt as long as I was around in U.S. attorney, people have got to be careful. And when I left, he thought everything was fine, and of course it wasn't, because all you have to do is look at the current U.S. attorney, Ron Machen, who is a black Democrat. He has been merciless to the Gray administration and the people on the council. And one of the great things about having a black U.S. attorney under these circumstances is that it shows when you're the United States attorney, you take what comes in the door. At my time, it was Marion Barry and a corrupt local government. For Ron Machen, it's Gray and a corrupt council and a corrupt middle bureaucracy. There's still bribery and extortion of immense proportion going on in D.C. government agencies. And that's the Barry legacy, corrupt local government. And look at the image of the District of Columbia around the United States. It's still a joke for Saturday Night Live, and it's all because of him. Notwithstanding all of his accomplishments and the good that he did for many people, the fact is the District of Columbia's, for example, March for Statehood was dealt an irreparably harmful
that's
blow
absolutely true.
by everything that he did, especially his arrest. And even today, when you hear the calls for statehood, even Barack Obama doesn't call for it, for heaven's sakes. And the reason is that Barry created a monster. And the monster was an out-of-control local government where there was no accountability, where you could extort contractors and people who came in for licenses and inspections. You can't imagine what it was like to be U.S. attorney during a time when developers, the big-time developers who built, they were afraid to deal with the administration. They would come and say, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? I say, report them. Come in, make a complaint. And they wouldn't, because they thought that their businesses would be destroyed. And you know what? They were enablers, every damned one of them. All these wealthy developers. They enabled him to be what he became, which was an emperor.
Joe DiGenova, we know that you and your partner, Victoria Tonsing, represent a couple of the whistleblowers in the Benghazi affair. And over the weekend, we had a report coming out of the House Intelligence Committee that basically a lot of people in favor of the Obama administration said this vindicates the administration and said there was no there in a lot of aspects of Benghazi. Senator Lindsey Graham remarkably took to CNN immediately and said this about the report.
I think the report's full of crap.
Why?
Quite frankly.
He continued on to talk about various reasons. I'm guessing that you have seen this report. I would love to know what is in that report that you think Lindsey Graham is taking issue with, and what you would take issue with as well. What was in that report?
Just about everything. But let me just say this: is saying that there was no cover-up, that everything was accidental, that the intelligence community didn't fail. That there was, there was bad security, but everybody agrees on that. Let me just tell you something. This report by Chairman Rogers, Mike Rogers, of the House Intelligence Committee, is a disgrace. All the Republicans in the House should be ashamed of it. The people on the committee, the Republicans, should be embarrassed. Have you noticed something interesting? Neither Rogers nor any Republican member of that committee has been on television defending this report.
Yeah, we pointed out earlier that it was actually released on Friday at 5 o'clock on a weekend when we largely thought the major discussion was going to be about Ferguson through the weekend.
And by the way, Republican Congressman Jeff Lake was on Meet the Press yesterday. He said this about Benghazi.
Yes, I've thought for a long time that we ought to move beyond that.
Move beyond that. Well, Trey Gowdy's committee continues, and we're looking forward to more information. Joe DiGenova, thanks so much for joining us today, as always.
Always a pleasure, Joe.